So hello, everyone. This is Yvonne Taylor, and am on interview number 3 for African American Health Awareness Month. And we are going to be talking today with Rachel Williams. What we want to talk about today is wealth, because we know that in our communities, and in any community for that matter, health is equivalent to wealth. Spoken to quite a few people, especially mental health professionals, and I've been instructed that, some things like racism is a health outcome, but so is lack of financial resources is a health outcome, because when you don't have what you need, you don't get what you want, and you don't get what you need, like things like food and clothing and shelter and things like that. So I'm talking to Rachel today about the health of wealth and creating wealth for yourself, especially in minority communities. Rachel is one of the co-founders of a company called Paige and Paxton. And with that, I'm going to shut my mouth and let Rachel continue that introduction for herself. Tell us a little bit about you today, Rachel. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Yvonne. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and your viewers. So Paige and Paxton is a brand of elementary STEM content, products, and services. Our sweet spot is really kids 3 to 7. At Paige and Paxton, what we've done is we've created a way using our adorable puzzle piece characters that you see behind me to teach very complex STEM concepts to kids as young as 4 years old. And the really innovative thing about what we do is at Paige and Paxton is that we teach STEM rigor, but also in a way that is fun and magical for the kids.
Oh, wow, that's excellent. So with that being said, what inspired you to start Paige and Paxton?
So what inspired me is really our kids' future. When you think about the kids who are in elementary school now, when they graduate into the workforce, if they don't have the requisite STEM skill sets, they're going to be left out of all the opportunities, right? Because the important thing about STEM is that we may not realize this, but in the future, every single job is going to require some level of STEM proficiency or STEM training. And then what's really important for your audience and this topic now is that when you think about where the opportunities are going to be, the new products, the new services, the new industries, and most importantly, the new wealth will be created in STEM fields as well. So what really inspired us is that we can help prepare our kids for these new opportunities.
Oh, that's awesome, because I mean, you can see it happening now, even with the teenagers. Everything that we do even now is online or virtual or things like that. So you do have to have those proficient skills so that you can function even in today's society. So getting the kids ready for what is going to be their normal, and
Right.
we're kind of doing that switch over. So that is awesome. So you did answer my second question, which is what led to the creation of Paige and Paxton. But how long have you guys been in business then?
So believe it or not, we've been in business since 2012. That's when we published our first book, which was called Paige Finds Her Perfect Fit, which is like a primer or introduction to science. And so when you think about it, we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary in August, which in and of itself is something to be proud of, because as you know, like 90% of businesses fail in their first year. And we've had lots of successes along the way. We've been able to impact the lives of 20,000 students in classrooms across the country. We've been featured in the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune and on WGN-TV. And in 2020, we were selected by the Chicago Bulls and BMO Harris as one of their African American social impact businesses. So we're really proud of what we've done in our little corner of the world so far.
Well, that's a lot of stuff to be doing. That's not so small a corner. That corner is rapidly expanding, throughout the country, because when you're talking about the Washington Post or the New York Times, things like that, once you catch on with those major publications, you probably will start to be like a blazing fire in a good way, in an educational way, not like burning down the forest or anything. So with that being said, the pandemic itself has unearthed some disturbing trends in wealth acquisition and distribution in the US, with large numbers of African American families falling way behind their Caucasian counterparts. What are your thoughts on that topic, and how has Paige and Paxton helped you and your group of entrepreneurs kind of start to bridge that gap?
Well, this is something that has persisted for a long, long time. There's a wealth gap between, white families and African American families. And as you know, we got a late start, because at one time our ancestors were like property that was handed down along with a farm and the livestock. And then we had 100 years of institutional racism. And so we got a really, really slow start. And so now what it's going to take, I think, is like all hands on deck. As African Americans, we're aware of the situation. We're discussing the situation now, and now we have to take action. And I think that's what it means for us, and what it means for a lot of African Americans is that, we're going to have to patronize Black businesses. We're going to have to hire Black employees. We're going to have to invest in other Black businesses in our community. And, the people who make it, because, there will be individual African Americans who are going to make it to the top. They already have. But it's really important for them to send the elevator back down and bring more African Americans up to the top. I mean, I think it's going to take a concerted effort at all levels to really make a dent in that.
Exactly. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to incorporate and build larger, more profitable communities, for that self-sustenance. With that being, that leads me to another question that's off the beaten path on the things that I've sent you. What has your success rate been in terms of offering Paige and Paxton to minority, and not necessarily African American, but other minority institutions of education, like private schools or groups, social groups, educational social groups, and what has been the reception of that? And do you see anything going forward with that, maybe to help to create that that new community that we're talking about?
So with Paige and Paxton, we have been used by like Chicago public school systems, but the majority of our schools now are either private schools or they're charter schools. Okay. And the reason for that is that, to tell you the truth, the sales cycle is a lot shorter, right? Absolutely. If you look at a really large school system, there are just so many different layers that you have to go through before you can actually sell them like textbooks, or you can sell them curriculum. And so we've found a nice little home with charter schools and private schools, in that, you go to the principal, you go to the CEO, and they say yes or no, right?
Yeah.
So the really good thing about that is that we've really been able to impact a lot of African American students. And this is very important to me, that we're shattering those stereotypes about who can be good at STEM and at what age. Absolutely. We have our curriculum, for example, and we also have, as I said, storybooks, but we're basically introducing things like microbiology and photosynthesis and, atoms and molecules to kids 3 to 7. And a lot of times people think, oh my God, these young children can't grasp these concepts, but they can grasp it if you teach it through the lens of childhood and the things that are relevant to them and impacts them. And so it is really exciting for me to see, you know, our African American kids and Latino kids, and even girls too. You know, they're underrepresented. Women are an underrepresented group in STEM fields. And the majority of STEM curricula is really kind of, and some of the research shows this, that if you're like a white male, you do well in that curriculum. But a lot of times girls and kids of color don't do as well because they have to develop something called STEM identity. And that means that even if they're bright and they're intelligent and they can handle the STEM coursework, they have to see themselves as somebody who participates in STEM. And that's one of our focuses. And one of our focuses in Paige and Paxton is that we develop that STEM identity in all kids, but with a special focus on girls and kids of color.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's really going to lay a very, very diverse foundation going forward because, like I said, we see that happening now, but they're in little pockets of the educational system. You'll see like one, maybe two, three of the children doing well at maybe the junior high, and it's particularly the high school level. You'll have the little pockets, and then as you get to the university level, those pockets are very few and far between. So it's really great to see that we're starting, you know, on the ground and kind of moving those flowers to be really tall sunflowers, large fields of them. Yeah.
That's definitely key. We have to introduce these concepts really early, as we say at Paige and Paxton, before kids figure out it's hard, you know, because, you know, they're developing their identities by the time they're 7 or 8 years old. A lot of kids have decided what they want to be when they grow up, or more importantly, they've decided things like, oh, I'm not a math person, or I can't be good at science. And so by really targeting them when they're young, when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, like I said, they don't even know it's hard. They just jump right in and do it, you know?
And that's
really exciting.
That's a good key to education, because the one thing that I learned about science is that I was a geek. I didn't learn it until I was in my very last semester of my college career. And I took a course in issues in social biology. And what they did, and what I love that your company does, is it tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one way. And that it doesn't matter if you're a little 3-year-old or a 7-year-old. If you get a good story, you're going to connect, especially if it's something that you're trying to grasp. But if you got a good story, so you guys are really on the cusp of doing this and doing it well. And that's going to lead me to the next question. Nowadays, many African Americans are turning to entrepreneurship to rewrite our histories and begin to create legacies for us, our families, and our communities. What are the steps that you and your partners have taken to create your legacy? And I know that your particular company is comprised of yourself and your 2 daughters. So, and so I would just ask, you know, because you all are a family-owned business, what are some of the steps that you're doing? Like, are you putting together a succession plan for the business or other family assets? So talk to us maybe about what that would look like for people starting and really they want to start to dig in and start to think about those things going forward.
Definitely, definitely. I'm so glad you brought this up, because we talked a little earlier about how we have a slow start as African Americans because we weren't able to pass down that wealth or that property for so long. So for a lot of us, it's like this might be the first or the second generation where we're able to actually leave something to our kids and grandkids. And so, you know, it's really important that we have a succession plan in place and that every family has a will and a trust agreement. And I don't care if we're talking about a few CDs or a 401k or a piece of property. You really need to have all that set up so that it passes on to your children and your grandchildren as expeditiously as possible and as cheaply as possible. You know, you don't want to have to leave a lot of debt behind for your children. You want to leave assets, because part of our problem as African Americans is that we're always starting from scratch. We're always reinventing the wheel. And now that we finally have the opportunity to leave whatever it is, it's really important that all those documents are in order and they pass exactly who you want them to pass to, you know, when the time comes. And there's just a little as possible hassle.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways that we can do those with the advent of the internet and all of the things that we do online. That's
There's
because
no excuse now. There's
right,
no excuse.
right. It's almost plug and play. You know, your will is like,
Yeah.
then put it at it. So, you know, like, oh, and you're done. And that's very important, you know, as we start to build these businesses and things like that. In the past, African American communities worked in partnership to create and sustain wealth. Do you use mainstream and minority vendors in your business?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
We use African Americans, we use female, particularly what's very inspiring for me is that we use a lot of subject matter experts to create our storybooks and to create our lessons. That's a key part of what we do at Paige and Paxton. We want to have people who have degrees in, for example, I talked about, well, we just did an aerospace engineering book, for example. So what I did was I reached out to professionals who have a degree in aerospace engineering and they work in the aerospace engineering field. And I had the opportunity to collaborate with and talk to so many brilliant African Americans and women.
Wow.
You know, people who work at NASA, people who work at universities, people who work at Boeing. And, you know, that was just like an amazing experience. And then for a couple of years, we had a wind engineer, an African-American woman who was based in Belgium, who was helping with develop our content for our curriculum. And so we definitely try to use a diverse workforce. But, you know, I also want to say that even as consumers outside of our business, we should really look to hire African-American businesses. So, you know, that's about, you know, if you're going to a bakery, you know, look for an African-American bakery. Your accountant could be African-American. The person who does your lawn could be African-American, you know, an African-American business. So we really do have to seek out those Black-owned businesses in our community and patronize them. And the other thing I think we have to realize, because I've been in business, oh my God, I don't even want to say how long I've been in business. But
you're a seasoned professional.
But, you know, you don't just want to seek out a Black-owned business when you're looking for the lowest price, right? So you want to do your due diligence like you do with any business, but you also have to realize that that African-American business probably has more challenges than another business, and their pricing might be a little higher. But, you know, I look at that as an investment. And I think the other thing that I hear from people sometimes, and from other African Americans, they'll say, well, you know, I tried an African American business and that didn't work out. Well, just because one didn't work out, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try another African American business. No one ever says, you know, I used a majority owned business and their service was horrible, but I'm never going to use another majority company again. But we always say that about African American and other minority companies. You get one bad experience and then you write everyone off, you know? And so I really like your viewers to keep that in mind too. You have to continue to give African American entrepreneurs a chance.
And to that point, I'd just like to kind of hone in there too. Any unpleasant experience is actually an opportunity for both parties to learn.
Yes,
I like to, if you have something that didn't work, tell me what didn't work for you, because that helps me to be better. If we're serious about business, then we're going to say, you know what, as long as the information is transferred and it's very, constructive.
I
If
agree.
you've got a constructive criticism for the way I did this, I'm a type of person, if I'm providing a service, I'm like, oh my gosh, can you tell me what didn't work for you? Can you tell me what would work for you? Because we're always going to try to grow, and that might give that person a chance to do what I always call a client recovery. I really appreciate you telling me that. Let me try to do this better. I'm going to cut my cost by 50%. You tell me what you think of that, or I'll tell you what, let's pull you in on an advisory board. Don't make it an unpleasant experience. Make it something where you maybe can grow together, because the consumer also wants to be heard as well. And I just know that from my neck of the woods, because like what I didn't say about myself is I'm a wellness professional. So I'm always in that, which is why this is near and dear to my heart. Um,
That is
I,
a good point.
right. I don't want to chase that bunny rabbit and take up too much of your time. So I will press on with the interview. Um, Paige and Paxton are unique in that they teach children, especially minority children, the foundation of STEM programs in a fun and entertaining way. How has this affected children in minority schools? You talked about the difficulty of getting into CPS.
CPS wasn't as difficult because, when we started in 2012, they were actually looking for resources. And we ran into the person who was kind of in charge of putting their elementary STEM program together. So we really lucked out with them. They were
Oh, okay,
actually
great.
our biggest customers. And yeah, I don't have anything. Yeah, that turned out to be a lot easier than we had anticipated. But in general, as we went forward, we found that it was really hard to actually navigate that bureaucracy
Yeah.
without having someone on the inside like we had. We ended up meeting her at a book fair.
Oh,
And
okay.
and then it was just kind of by accident. And she was like, wow, look at what you're doing here. I'm looking for resources for, our kindergarten, our STEM magnet schools. And I was like, great, because we have those resources. But yeah, in terms of going forward, we really did end up more in, like I said, in that, charter school or private space.
Okay. Um, Great, because it seems like you're going more towards the magnets. Do they have, or do you know if they have any plans on placing those into the regular schools, especially in the neighborhoods where they're really underserved? Because to me, those are the students we have diamonds in the rough there. I mean, there are
Yeah,
so many brilliant children that are being left behind because the
I agree.
resources aren't there. And if
I
they
agree.
just had what they needed, boy, you could catapult those kids into just unending opportunities.
It
So,
is. And I think you're so right. It's like STEM education at the elementary level shouldn't be like a nice to have. It needs to be a must have. And, that's because, as you said, you have all of this unused talent in minority communities, in rural communities. And a lot of times we don't see them as being STEM professionals or being someone who can actually do well in STEM. But I always like to say to people that this is not a zero-sum game. It's like when you think about our workforce, the majority of the workforce in the US is going to be women and kids of color.
yeah,
And if we're going to maintain our position as an economic superpower, we know that future rests in STEM, and that means we have to get more girls and more kids of color into STEM. Because
exactly.
they're going to create jobs for other people. They're going to have new ideas for new products and services. And so the more people that we can get into STEM from all diverse backgrounds, it's going to raise everybody up.
Exactly.
I wish people would really start thinking of it that way. It's not like, oh, these kids are getting it, but these kids aren't getting it. All kids should get it.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be wasting any human capital because we have so many problems to solve. And
Exactly.
as you said, that we believe that genius has no boundaries, and we've seen it. We've
Absolutely.
seen kids in some of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods, grasp on the STEM and start talking about, hey, I love chemistry. I want to be a chemist when I grow
Oh,
up.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is amazing. And this is what I always say, you never know where God planted the person that's going to cure cancer.
You
That
don't.
person could be in the very underserved community, whether it's
You don't.
urban or rural or any place. You never know where that person is planted until everybody gets the opportunity. And I really like the point that you made that human capital is human capital. It
It
doesn't matter what where they come from or what they look like. If all learn and all have the opportunity, then we all benefit. We
is.
all benefit. I was just saying that earlier today with a client. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. We do. We all benefit.
Absolutely. Um, Businesses often have challenges obtaining capital, and you kind of touched on this with the longevity of your company. Um, how did you acquire your startup capital, and how are you able to maintain that? Because people that look at you and look at this interview says, "Wow, I want to do what she's doing. I want to take the next Paige and Paxton and run it into sixth grade. And then I'm going to run it into high school." You know what I mean? So what would that person, what would it look like for them to get a startup? Like just what were your humble beginnings, and maybe what would you suggest to people as well when they're wanting to start up a business?
Well, in terms of capital
Yeah,
investment,
capital, startup and maintaining, once you get
yeah.
running.
So acquiring capital is really, really one of the biggest challenges of being an African American business. Um, you need capital at various stages, right? So that like that first round is friends and family, right? And so if you look at most African Americans, a lot of us don't have friends and family that have 50,000 or $250,000 just lying around that they can write us a check and not need that money, like this is extra money or whatever. And then, you can go the angel investor route, or, where you have these high income, high net worth individuals who just kind of like your idea. And then you have, of course, venture capitalists. And we, at the friends and family stage, we did a couple of like small rounds where we did a Kickstarter campaign and we reached out to friends and family, and we were able to produce our second book, Paxton Finds Its Perfect Fit. And then we also tried to go the venture capital route, but it was at a point where it was like an opportunity cost because we were spending so much time and energy and resources into pitching that we really are like, well, if we spent the same time and resources into customer acquisition and building our business, then maybe we could just have our customers and our business kind of fund the business. So to make a long story even longer, we are basically self-funded. We used our savings, we used our credit cards, we used our retirement income. And a couple of years ago, the scale started tipping where we weren't putting any more money into our business, but our business was actually taking care of us. And that was a really, really good feeling. And the other thing that came out of this is that, there was no like decrease in our owner equity because, now we're looking at maybe a Paige and Paxton cartoon series. We're going to need to raise capital for that. And right now we are 100% the owners, so that puts us in a good position for the next phase.
Absolutely.
But, it was really hard and slow in the first phase because, we were unable to or unwilling to spend years and years looking for capital. Because
Absolutely.
when it comes to like venture capitalists, they tend to invest in people who look like them. And there weren't a lot of venture capitalists who look like us, you know. And so we just said, hey, we're just going to put our heads down. We're going to use the resources that are at our disposal, and we're going to build a business and grow it that way.
Awesome. And that's really, once upon a time in another life, I had two businesses, so I totally get it. But my outcomes were a little bit different. But that is to me a great success story. It's one that I think that people that look like us, I would look at that as something that is very inspirational to me, because kind of that's how we always do it. And you actually are winning at it. And it just goes to show that hard work and perseverance actually will pay off as long as you keep putting the work in. So that's amazing. With that being said, I'm going to give you my last question. What advice would you give to an up and coming minority entrepreneur?
What advice would I give? This is going to sound like really kind of weird advice, but for entrepreneurs and all African Americans, I would like the advice that I would give is first is to live under your means, right?
Absolutely.
That's the
Absolutely.
first thing. We need to live under our means. And I'll never forget, I was talking to the CEO of a company, and he said to me, every time you buy something, whether it's a candy bar or a house or what, you're transferring a piece of your wealth to somebody else.
Wow.
And I know, I was like, wow,
That is huge.
Yeah, isn't that huge?
That is huge.
Spending that way. And so I'm like, live below your means. You don't need you already have 5 black coats. You don't need a 6th one, right? You don't need to trade in your 55-inch screen TV for a 65-inch screen TV. Take as much of your extra and disposable income as you can and invest it, save it, put it back into your business, invest in other businesses, really be a lot more stingy about the way that you spend your money. The second thing I would say is that, customers are the lifeblood of any business. So you always have to treat your customers right. They are always right. And if you treat them like royalty, then they'll be loyal to you. And they'll also, refer other customers to you. So I think that's important as well.
Absolutely. Those are two perfect things. Those are things that I've heard along the way. Live beneath your means.
Yeah.
Live beneath your means. And so what about that? You just don't have to spend everything. I tell people I'm as frugal as I can be.
Yeah.
I'm as frugal as I can be. And that's just how we have to do it until we get, and even when you get to where you make it, there's no such thing because life is continual. Still do that.
Yes.
You never know when. You never know when.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I do have one request of you. So when you do the cartoon, can I be a voiceover? That is one thing that's on my bucket list. I would like to be the voiceover for a cartoon character.
Well, you have an amazing voice. So
I have a lot of silly voices as well that I don't let those out. I'll do that in person when I see it. Don't do it on camera.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I do like to do silly things like that. And I actually have a bucket list. And one of the bucket list items is to be a voiceover for a cartoon character.
Wow.
I'm weird like that.
Yes. That's so cool. You never know who you're going to meet and what kind of resources that they'll bring to bear.
Exactly. So Rachel, this was an amazing, very fruitful interview. I learned a lot. I think it's so awesome. And there's so much that's going to be passed on to the people that view these videos. I know we're going to get a lot of likes and a lot of shares. So, so this was just amazing. And I just really thank you so much for letting me take this much of your time.